Hiya, I'm Jasper, and welcome to your video review for the Chronicles of Riddick. So, it's a movie starring Vin Diesel, Dame Judi Dench is in it, Carl Urban is in it, Thandie Newton, as well as Alexa Davalos. So, as always, I'm going to give you the good, the bad, and the furry. To start off with the furry, there are these really cool dog type things that have this like awesome fur. I don't know exactly what you want to call it. It's not quite fur, but it's not quite skin. It's not quite scales, but I like whatever it is. It's cool. And they have like they're super strong and super powerful, and they like turn red when they're angry. So it's really awesome to see those, and the CGI definitely holds up for them. So moving on to the good and the bad. I would highly recommend watching Pitch Black before watching this movie because they make enough references to it that I think it is important to watch it. But what I will say is that Pitch Black is more of a horror movie with some action elements, in my opinion. And this is more of an action sci-fi, well, more of an action fantasy with elements of sci-fi movie. And then the sequel to this, Riddick, goes back to the more like horror element roots. So I enjoyed this movie, but of the trilogy of live-action Riddick movies so far, I think that this is probably the weakest one, and not because of just the expanded universe and the technology and everything else. Like, I think that they did a really good job establishing the universe. Like, I liked how they had Helios Prime, and they talked about how, you know, like they're the ones that share the sun with the other Helios planets in the system, and I thought that the implementation of the necromongers, like they showed like, hey, they get the little stabby things in the neck to convert people, and that's how they're so successful to rapidly convert people. And it showed, you know, they have all these huge fighter squadrons and these massive things. Like the scale of how they could do a planetary invasion so quickly does make sense with what they have. But my problem, and what I think that maybe a lot of people's problems that they don't really realize, maybe they just really liked this horror aspect of it and didn't like the kind of genre change for it. But I think that probably what hurt this movie the most is some of the weird things that they just never explained. It didn't make sense. I remember watching, I believe it was the commentary version of this one, and essentially the weird dude, like the just random lieutenant guy who had the knife sticking out of his back that Riddick like takes and then like stabs him with it. The director or the writer or whoever it was that was talking was just basically like, oh yeah, I saw this and I thought it looked really cool, you know, just like, oh, he's just like, oh, he's just bearing through the pain, like doesn't even care, and that's just how he has it, and that's just one of the things that he does. And it's like, I mean, sure, but logically it doesn't make any sense because he's wearing armor, and you are establishing that these people are traveling from planet to planet and recruiting people and arming them and getting them in, like, you know, body armor and whatnot. So it's not like this guy is always wearing his body armor. And it's clear that that knife, with both the director's intent and from what we saw, is always just there, which doesn't make any sense because it's weakening his armor and it's weakening him, and he would have to take it out every time he took off his armor. So, like, what the hell? And speaking of that knife, I know it's supposed to look so cool, but anybody who just takes a split second to think about the practicality of a knife that size, it's fine, I guess, for the size, but just like the overall pattern of it, it's so weak, and it would be so brittle because you've carved out so much of it. And like, I know the scene where he's like flipping it is supposed to be cool, but it's just dumb because the knife is clearly not sharp, and it doesn't make sense for anything other than like a battle type situation. But even then, you would want something that would actually be able to puncture through the armor more or slice through things more, and that thing would just shatter essentially. And it was dumb. And then you have instances of where, and again, this time around I rewatched the not director's cut because there were some things that were added in the director's cut that I didn't care for as much. And also it wasn't available on streaming platforms that I was watching this time around. But in this one, they have, I don't know, I don't remember if the director's cut explains why the defending air, like ships and whatnot, were not already in the air. And you could argue that it's like, oh, well, these guys just appear out of nowhere. Except that they don't, because Riddick lands and is like looking up in the sky, and then his Mohammed person or whatever, like looks up and he's like, they say that the comet always precedes them. And it's like, okay, so you see this comet, you see them, like, and you find out as they like do the exterior planet shot that like, okay, the comet is made up of all of their ships. Like, the planetary people see this. Like, we with our technology level would be able to see that, like, okay, that's not a comet, that's made of a bunch of fucking ships. So they should also be able to do that and should already have had their ships off the ground in order to fight these things, and they weren't. And then you have another instance where there's this, group of defenders, foot soldiers defending against a bunch of the necromonger foot soldiers, and it was a cool scene because you see that the necromongers are not totally invincible and that they were overwhelmed by the defending forces, and it was a way to demonstrate the staff thing shoots up a thing into the air and then explodes to reiterate that, like, hey, that technology is just supersized for their planet killers when they leave a planet. And that's a neat way to establish that, except that they, while this is going on, do like some lightning, like flash on, flash off lights to show that, like, oh, hey, there's a whole, like, platoon, squadron, group, whatever you want to call it, battalion of necromongers just on the edges of this battle, of this little street section. So you mean to tell me that these necromongers that were getting beaten were able to get beaten, but these other necromongers are so good and so knowledgeable about everything that they know how to be on the very, very edge of that blast zone to not get hit by the blast zone or even the things that would get blasted from the blast zone. Like, it just doesn't militarily make sense. And so it's things like that bug me about this movie, because it would have been so easy to just not have those guys there, and then that scene would have made more sense. And then you have the thing about, like, Riddick goes and, like, murders a bunch of these foot soldiers that are on the ground, and, he gets all pissy because he recognizes the one that killed his friend, right? But he goes to kill the guy that killed his friend, and then, blah, 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 blah happens, and then he escapes from them, and then he's running away, and he gets picked up by the bad guys, but, like, he chose to get captured by them, because we know that he could have fought them, but he chose to get captured by them. At least it seemed that way. Now, it could have just been him playing bravado and, like, yeah, they actually had him dead to rights type of thing, but from how it's played, it looks like he could have taken them on. And based on the Furion in him and able to take on other things, I feel like he could have taken them on. And he didn't. So he chose to leave. Leaving his friend's kid and wife there. Like, we kind of established at the end of Pitch Black, spoilers for that, that he's not a terrible guy. And then we established in this one that, like, he's going after to protect his friend, and then throughout this one, you see him, like, protecting Kira and yada yada. So, but we just fucking ignore the family. Like, yes, towards the very end of the movie, you find out that, like, oh, okay, they also were not captured. But how we left them was just like, hey, stay here a minute, don't get seen. Like, stay in this corner with a dead body or whatever. Like, so we established that he cares about them because he, like, protects them from a thing, but then he just abandons them to go find Kira and get her. Like, it just, where was that going? You needed to have something else to establish why he wasn't just leaving them to go do something else. Yeah, so there's things like that, and then I think that while it's cool to have the super powerful dog things like bending the bars when they hit, because they're a CGI thing, bending bars, and the bars definitely don't look CGI, but it's neat that they did that. But then when they leave, okay, spoiler for most of the way through the film, when they leave tombs in there, like, you see them already bending the thing. Like, I know it's supposed to be a ha-ha funny moment, but those things are going to bend through the bars. And if they are already bending through the bars there, why don't they ever escape? Also, it's less ha-ha funny when you think about him about to get ripped apart because, he's an asshole bounty hunter on payday. Like, or a merc going for a payday. Like, he's not the worst guy in the world from what we have seen of him. And the fact that he was able to rustle up another crew, like, I'm not saying he's a great guy, but does he deserve to get torn apart by dogs bad? I don't know. Maybe the guys that were attacking Kira deserve that, but Tombs, I don't know about that. So, yeah. And then there are things that I think you might need to rewatch. Like, I had to rewatch the scene of him killing the dude with the teacup so many times to be like, how did he do that? And it's because he slams it on a rock that splays it out, makes it sharper, and then inserts it into the guy. So that was a little unclear. And yeah, so but it is a fun movie. I know that I've talked about a lot of problems that I have with it, and some of the technology is a little funky, but I do appreciate that they did such a good job of establishing the rest of the universe, like having how they have the communication systems, or how they have like the mind reader people. And what I love is how they didn't. So some people may not like this, but I really liked how he's in the Citadel thing, and the guy's like, oh, convert or die, and then he's like, I'll take a piece of him, and then he stabs him, and then the guy's like, bring him to the mind readers or whatever. We're gonna like investigate this guy, and he's just like getting ready for a fight. Which he's surrounded by like badass necromongers. I don't know that he would have won that, but I love that Thandie Newton just comes in and is like, why don't we just ask the breeder to go? And like, what I love is that most of the times when something like that would happen, the camera or the cinematographer or whoever would like decide that like you're gonna make the camera start going all crazy angle and whooshy, or you're gonna have like the like perspective stretch and skew and squiggle around, and then maybe have like filters on to like change the coloration of things or make things super blurry, to like establish that there is something mindy, control-y-ish going on. But I thought they did a really good job, and let me know if you agree if you've watched the movie. I think they did a really good job of establishing, just from his behavioral change, that like, and just like how she was like going around him and like touching him, that like clearly some pheromone bullshit is happening to make him suddenly be like, yeah, I'll do what you want. And it's not until she leaves and is like, the harder you struggle, the worse it'll be. And then like you see him like, oh, like, what the, how did I get here? Like, what is going on? Like, you see him snap out of it. And I thought that was awesome that she like just releases her control on him. But they do it in such a good, subtle way. And I like sometimes when it's clear, but subtle. So I thought that was a really good maneuver with the filmmaking. But things I would have liked to have explored more is the elementals. But I like their implementation. And from the director's commentary, apparently that like making her disappear in sections whenever the wind hit her was super like expensive and difficult. And I think it was worth it because the elemental thing was really cool. And had this made more money and they would have been able to continue in this action fantasy sci-fi genre, I would have liked to have seen more elementals and what they could do and their involvement, maybe some younger ones or whatever else. But obviously that didn't happen. But it's still neat to see. And Dame Judi Dench is always a win. Carl Urban, always a win. And he does an excellent job of, having that ambition. And just him and Thandie Newton's, they had such great interaction. I thought the pacing of this movie was good, and the lines were funny. I liked, like, even the characters in the prison, they were able to each have their own, some of it was accents, but delivery and how they did it, like, each character had a uniqueness to them, even the guards. So that was, I think, really well done. And, I thought it was fun how many callbacks and how many things that they had back to Pitch Black for trying to make things understand, like, talking about 20 menthol cools and the sweet spot and just the shine on his eyes. And I liked that they were like, oh, hey, yeah, no, that's not just a surgery thing. He's a Furian, and that's a whole different animal. Like, that was neat, and I thought that was fun to increase the lore and to give that little extra power to him. So, yeah, the implementation of the things on the ground, like the how their technology worked, like with the ships sucking things in to like keep them airborne, and then just the wide shots of them landing on the planet, like all that stuff was good. And I loved just the surety that Vin Diesel had. I liked his new I liked the goggles that he had on him, and just the like how he showed how much he cared, like that, especially that scene where he was talking with Kieran. He's like, I went to like basically an exile for 5 years to keep you out of the Mercs' hands, and he went and joined up with them, and just that hurt and that pain that happened there. So yeah, I do recommend this movie. I think it's good, and I think it's a good follow-up to Pitch Black, even if it is a different genre. So, and I think that the establishing thing for how he ended up where he was in Riddick, the sequel. It's better for you to watch this movie because then you can appreciate it more, but I don't think it's absolutely necessary to watch this movie in order to enjoy Riddick, that movie. So that's what I will say about that. But that's all I have for this one. Thanks for coming. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you the next one. Bye.